Hi, my name is Shinae Park. I teach science here at the Lawrenceville School.
And I'm Chris Cunningham. I'm the assistant headmaster and dean of faculty, and I also teach English. And we're here just to say a little bit about Harkness teaching and learning at the school, one of the things that is distinctive about Lawrenceville. I guess the first thing that people often ask is, well, what does Harkness teaching actually look like in a classroom? And I think in a humanities classroom, like an English classroom where I teach, people have an intuitive sense of what that looks like. It's students sitting around a table like this one, talking about wrestling with some kind of problem of interpretation. Maybe we're reading a poem, we're looking at a story, and we're sharing different perspectives on how we see it and how we understand it, and work together towards some kind of common understanding. So that kind of makes sense for a lot of people, and then versions of that happen in history classes, in religion and philosophy classes, in upper level English classes, and so on. But I know the one question that parents and students often ask us is, what does that look like in a math or science class? And I know that that's a question that Shinae gets a lot.
I think in a math or science classroom, it can certainly look like that. We do have whole class discussions where we are submitting our findings for critical review. We're sort of helping each other fine-tune ideas together. But it might also look like a small group of students working on a problem set together, maybe students at the board showing the rest of the class the problem-solving process that they use to reach a solution. Maybe it involves students working together to create an experimental design, or students conducting a lab together. So there's all these different sort of strategies that we use to help students internalize information and solidify their understanding together.
A mentor of mine used to say that learning is the residue of thinking. And so whoever's doing the thinking, whoever's doing the intellectual heavy lifting in a classroom, that's the person who's doing the learning. And I think in traditional classrooms, often that's the teacher, standing in front of the classroom, talking, lecturing, presenting, working out problems at the board. And so part of the point of a Harkness classroom, whether that's a math and science classroom, whether that's an English classroom, a language classroom, is getting the students to do the work and let the teacher pull back a bit and let them do that, again, intellectual heavy lifting.
I think that what we're asking the students to do is incredibly difficult. It's risky. We're asking them basically to publicly fail in front of their peers as they sort of work their way through the information. We're asking them to be willing to be wrong. We're asking them to challenge their peers when they think they are wrong. We're asking them to be challenged by their peers. And I think all of those things are really difficult to do. But I think the students are generally really invested in each other's learning and understanding, and so they make a lot of space for each other to sort of walk back on their comments. They give grace to each other to make mistakes and to learn from the mistakes, and so I think they're all in this together.
And we're actually asking faculty to do a hard thing. I look for people who are passionate about their subject, who love math or science or English, and I'm asking them to come into their classrooms and then to just be quiet part of the time, a good part of the time, and let students make mistakes, let students be confused, let students do this thinking in front of them as opposed to getting up and explaining everything. If anyone who's ever tried to tutor someone or help someone, there's this impulse to leap in and solve the problem for them. And so one of the biggest challenges for all of our faculty is to let students make mistakes and to let students be confused and to grapple. But that's actually the real value of Harkness teaching, which is the learning that comes out of those moments of struggle, and then those aha moments of discovery and learning.
I think one of the challenges as a teacher is knowing how to balance how many mistakes do you let the students make versus when do you jump in and sort of help guide them. I think students can talk in circles around each other in a way that actually looks like Harkness because they're engaged in a lot of passionate conversation, but it's not actually furthering their understanding of anything. And so as a teacher, you kind of need to guide the conversation enough so that you are equipping the students to reach the set out objectives for the class, while still empowering the students to think for themselves, to think critically, to discover things on their own, to work together. The end goal of Harkness is, of course, we want to train the students how to think once they leave the classroom, once they leave Lawrenceville. And so what we want to do is give them the practice in the classroom. So how do you wrestle with evidence? How do you be comfortable with uncertainty and embrace ambiguity? How do you be skeptical of claims until you have enough data that support those claims? How do you collaboratively work towards reaching a solution? All of these sorts of things we're trying to help the students practice so that once they go out in the real world, world, they have the tools that they need to be able to fight for their ideas and to refine their thinking out there.
One of the questions that we actually get on revisit days from parents is, what about the child who's perhaps a bit more reticent, a bit more quiet, who likes to maybe consider what they're thinking before they speak, who's going to pull back a bit? And I think that's a good question, something that we actually work on quite a bit with our students, but I guess I strongly believe that being able to actively engage in a conversation, to work with a group of people on a problem, those are crucial academic and professional life skills. And in the same way that a student who walks into my classroom and says, well, I'm not a really good writer necessarily, I need to get better, I don't just say, okay, you're not a good writer, I won't make you write. I actually want to lean in and give them the skills they need to grow and become better writers. In the same way that when a student walks into my classroom and says, I'm less confident speaking up in class, and I may need some help with that. In the same way, I will work with that child and give them the skills that they need to be a really good collaborator, or a good participant in a discussion or conversation.
And I think it's also an incredible skill for students to learn that they don't always have when they first come in, of knowing, the loudest person is not the one making the biggest contribution to the discussion. Right. And so sometimes the person who's speaking the most is not the one that is really moving the conversation forward. And sometimes it's just the quieter student that speaks one time, but really makes an insightful comment. That's critical to the understanding of what we're doing that day.